Let's enter the Colts war room, trying to resurrect the career of Carson Wentz, who reunites with his former offensive coordinator Frank Reich. Indy with only 6 draft picks total. It's just 2 in the top 125. They have the 21st overall pick, and they have the 54th overall pick. There's also a report that came out on the Dan Patrick Show that before the Colts went out and traded for Wentz, that they actually called up Andrew Luck to see if he was willing to come back. Obviously, he must not have been, and went out and traded for Wentz, sending a 3rd-round pick in this year's draft to the Eagles and a conditional 2nd-round pick in next year's draft. Now, that 2nd-round pick next year could turn into a 1st-round pick, but the Colts really putting everything behind Carson Wentz, at least for this season, in hopes that reuniting with Frank Reich does Carson Wentz good. He was pretty good when he was with Frank Reich in Philadelphia before he left to take over the Colts head coaching position. I'm Chris Hassel. We're talking Indianapolis Colts, joined by the 2-time Super Bowl champ Bryant McFadden and Danny Kanell. And Danny, what do you expect from Carson Wentz in Indianapolis this season?
I think this is one of the most fascinating storylines of the entire NFL season, Chris. I really do, because the Colts bring him in, they make the move to try to rekindle that magic of Carson Wentz's year from 2017, where he was in the MVP conversation and looked like he was going to be, a perennial Pro Bowler in the future of the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, we know what happened since then, as, injuries, criticisms, and poor play kind of plagued him throughout the last several seasons. So he's trying to rekindle that magic with Frank Reich. I do think it's interesting that they called Andrew Luck, who probably answered from his boat somewhere in the islands, and said, nah, I am good. My body's feeling great. But I think, confidence is a big part of this. I think Carson Wentz has been battered and bruised physically and mentally. I do think Philadelphia is one of the tougher places to play from fan criticism when you think of all the scrutiny that you'll be under. Not that any NFL market is easy to play in, but I do think Indianapolis, a fresh start, the support of a fan base early on, kind of rekindling some of those vibes could be beneficial for Carson Wentz. But as we're going to address here, I think they need to put some pieces around him to give him the best chance to succeed.
Well, for me, when you look at Carson Wentz and what to expect from Carson Wentz, I don't know. I think to be determined, to say the least, and the reason why I say that is because we all emphasize 2017, where he played great football, high-level football. But since then, he's been injured and he's been inconsistent. So when you look at Carson Wentz as a quarterback, who is he? Is he more of the 2017 version or the version that we've seen over the last few years? And I can tell you this much, guys, when you're talking about sports, we're in a comparing business. The best way to understand and assess who players are, we compare them. We compare draft prospects to vets. We compare players that replace other players. And looking at Carson Wentz this season, everything that he does, we will compare to what Philip Rivers did last year. Philip Rivers threw for over 4,000 yards, completed roughly under 60% of his passes, 24 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and the team got into the postseason. So from the individual perspective, Carson Wentz, his numbers in 2021 will be compared to what Philip Rivers did in 2020. The overall numbers offensively and the overall team success will be compared to what they did last year. And anything less will be a letdown from the individual perspective and from the team perspective.
That was obviously the biggest offseason addition and the biggest move that this team has made, period. That's one we're going to be looking at all season. And the season is going to be judged, like B-Mac said, depending on how well Carson Wentz does and how far he can take them. But how did they do in free agency specifically, Danny?
Well, I think it was, that was a big part of their offseason, the biggest storyline by far. Getting T.Y. Hilton back on this squad, I think, is another familiar face that you'll see there. Other than that, there was not a ton of moves. So I think they swang for the fences. I'm not so certain, B-Mac was just talking about Philip Rivers. What kind of move is that? I don't know if it's an upgrade from what we've seen. I mean, Phillip Rivers put up pretty good numbers. That's the bar that's been set now for Carson Wentz, which isn't going to make it any easier. Yes, he's younger, he's fresher, but I feel like there's a little more baggage coming with him because of the uncertain play. Phillip Rivers, for a lengthy career, had seen the ups and downs of the NFL and kind of survived those and, been on his way up the whole season. Carson Wentz has been way more of a roller coaster ride. So if you get the best version of Carson Wentz, you swing for the fences, it's a home run. But if you get the version you've seen the last couple years, it's a massive miss.
Yeah, no doubt, Danny. I'm right there with you. I think the big fish was Carson Wentz, trying to find a replacement to Phillip Rivers. Like you said, played real good football for their offense last year. They were able to do so and get in Carson Wentz. And then outside of Carson Wentz, I love bringing back T.Y. Hilton. We heard that he had other suitors trying to land his services. He comes back, didn't have that breakthrough type year that we've seen in years past, but yet and still put up more than serviceable numbers in that offense. And then getting Xavier Rhodes back. He played real good football for their defense. And that defense was a unit that wasn't really talked about a lot when you look at some of the toughest defenses in the National Football League last year. But they played some stellar football, and a lot of their success had to do with the guys in the secondary, specifically speaking, Xavier Rhodes. So this was a team that didn't really need a lot, right? Outside of the quarterback position, they lost some guys on the offensive line. I expect for them to add some depth there. The same could be said defensively with the front as well. But looking at getting a top talent-like player in Carson Wentz to replace Phillip Rivers, that was the most important factor for their team, and they were able to basically solve that problem.
So heading into the draft, which begins a week from tonight, Thursday night, the first round, and then Friday, the second and third rounds. Only 2 picks in those first 3 rounds combined. They've got the 21st overall pick and then the 54th overall pick. What's their biggest draft need, Danny?
I think it's pretty clear, and I think we've talked so much about Carson Wentz. Well, you want to make sure you set him up for success. And with the retirement of Anthony Costanzo, the tackle for the Colts, I think it's pretty simple. They need a tackle. They need somebody that they can put out there who's experienced in college, who can step in, who can play early, play right away. I think that has to be priority number 1. Then you look a little bit deeper. I think, look at what the tight end position meant with Zach Ertz to Carson Wentz. I would possibly address that one. Maybe not in the second round, maybe in the 4th. That 3rd round pick, as you mentioned, they lost to the Eagles as part of that trade. I think defensive back. B-Mac mentioned Xavier Rhodes, but he's only coming back on a 1-year deal. The secondary was 22nd in the NFL in passing yards allowed, so they could use a little bit of depth. Maybe somebody young in there, but I think offensive line, tackle position has to be the place that you shore up first with that first overall, the first round pick. I mean, I think it's imperative you get Carson Wentz comfortable, and I do think it's interesting. Some of the issues that Carson Wentz was plagued with the last few seasons, Andrew Luck was catching criticism for that before Frank Reich got there, and his play improved, put him in good positions. Andrew Luck was trying to do too many things, was taking too many hits, playing the role of superhero. Exactly the same things we said around Carson Wentz. So one of the issues they can address is offensive line, so he doesn't feel like he's running for his life and has to scramble around and make these hero-type plays every single down.
Well, I'm gonna go a different direction. The biggest need for me is pass rusher. The reason why I say that is because you look at that stellar unit from last year. They're losing 15.5 sacks when you look at the players in Danico Autry and Justin Houston. Justin Houston had 8, Danico had 7.5. That's production that will be missed big time for this upcoming unit. So being able to replace that production, not to mention the leadership, the experience that both of those players were able to provide to that front, that's gonna be a huge, huge loss. So they gotta find a way to address those numbers that will be lost this upcoming season, because we talked about Phillip Rivers last year, we talked about the offensive line, but like I said, the balance that they had in totality, especially on the defensive side, it had a lot to do with the guys up front that trickled down to the second level guys, that trickled down to the third level guys. And the best way to have a successful defense is to start with the foundation, which is the front. So I expect for them at some point in time in this upcoming draft next week to address the production that was lost when Autry and Houston left.
So Bryant, with the 21st overall pick, who are some guys specifically you think the Colts should be targeting for that pass rusher position?
Well, Chris, I got two ideal names that can definitely add production to the front. Like I mentioned, when you talk about rushing the passer, I got two guys. The number one player I think would be huge if he is available for the Colts, where they select 21st in this upcoming draft in the first round. Kwity Paye from Michigan, a beast of a pass rusher. Super strong, 6'2", around 260. He plays so fast, and I love his hustle. I love the ambition that he plays when he's rushing the passer. Not to mention a stand-up guy against the ground and pound attack as well. I could easily see him being a day one starter instantly if he gets drafted by the Indianapolis Colts. And outside of Paye, man, Greg Rousseau, I mean 6'6", 260 plus, had 15.5 sacks in 2019 and only started after week 6. Think about that. This is a guy that has a high ceiling. He might not be as refined as some of the other pass rushers that we'll hear their name called in the first 2 days of the draft, but he has a high ceiling, and because of that, someone will be willing to roll the dice and believe that this guy can be a dominant pass rusher, similar to what we're seeing from Myles Garrett in a Cleveland Browns uniform. So I think those two guys are two names to really monitor and watch when the Indianapolis Colts get ready for their first selection, because I do believe they need to address the woes on the defensive line.
I love it. If you're going defensive line, those are outstanding picks. You know where I'm going. I said offensive tackle. I think you go for this at this position to try to protect Carson Wentz. I got two guys that I look at. I want somebody who's ready to step into play early. And that's a tough task to ask for a tackle. But if you've got multiple years starting in college, that at least helps. It shows me that you're up to task. And I got one who played at one of the most pressure-packed places in the country at Alabama, in Alex Leatherwood. See him on the left side, protecting Carson Wentz's backside. He was a 5-star player coming out of high school, multiple-year starter, has played a lot of football in an NFL-style system with a lot on his plate, and playing against some of the best rushers that you'll have to go against in the SEC should prepare him at least somewhat for the NFL. The other guy I looked at coming out of the Big 12, another guy, multiple 3-year starter, Sam Cosmi out of Texas. He's extremely athletic. He's a player who played at the right side early in his career, then showed left, showed some versatility there along the offensive line. He's big, he's physical, he's athletic. He even caught a touchdown pass as tackle eligible play. So I love that. He's got pretty good footwork. Another player you would expect to be ready. Now there's going to be some bumps along the way for any tackle as they're starting early, but you would expect them to be stepped up, ready to go from day one. So either one of these tackles I would feel comfortable taking at 21.
And that would be on day 1 of the draft, the first round. Day 2, they're only going to have one pick unless there are some moves. They have the 54th overall pick. Bryant, who are some players that they could be targeting in the second round?
Adding some talent in the secondary will be huge for the growth of the defense. I look at Tyson Campbell, underclassman from the University of Georgia, a talented athletic guy. Didn't really perform as well as I thought he would at Georgia, but the best is yet to come, especially if he gets the proper coaching. Outside of cornerback, what about Anthony Schwartz, a fast electrifying wide receiver? We didn't get a chance to see the type of production he could provide at Auburn because of the inconsistency at the quarterback position. But I can tell you this much: speed kills, and he has a lot of it. Raven Jordan, talented tight end from the University of Miami, could add some depth at the tight end position. Then Walker Little, a 6'6", 6'7", massive tackle, a guy that can play either side if need be. I think he could definitely add some depth to the offensive line there. So those are the guys that I would like to circle with the Colts when you talk about day 2 and day 3 type picks, because I think these guys will be wonderful in that organization.
I love it, especially the Brevin Jordan take there, B-Mac, because I had him as my list as a potential second rounder too. I mentioned earlier, Carson Wentz loved throwing to Zach Ertz when he was there in Philadelphia. He saw the comfort level he played with there. I think he'd be a fantastic selection. He's athletic enough. You can split him out in the slot, try to get those matchups. His route running and quickness improved in 2020 when he took advantage this past season, so I like that. I mentioned the secondary. A defensive back who's been climbing up some boards is Aaron Robinson. Out of UCF, he's athletic. He could be a player that could come in. Because you signed Xavier Rhodes for a 1-year deal, you don't have to force him into action, but you could groom him for the future. So I think addressing some of those positions and needs would be a perfect draft for the Colts.
Danny Kanell, Bryant McFadden in the war room for the Indianapolis Colts. Let's take a look at the odds for the Colts this season. To make the playoffs, minus 230. So we're expecting them to get in. And one of the favorites in the AFC South, plus 100. That is the favorite spot as of now, 12-1 to win the AFC. So high expectations for the Colts and for Carson Wentz to turn things around. But up next, we're going to hit the war room for the defending AFC South champion Tennessee Titans. They've got a new offensive coordinator after the Falcons hired Arthur Smith as their head coach.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.